Bet the board.
What do you mean you don't bet? I mean, I don't bet. You know, I don't gamble. I don't. I never have, and I never will. Yeah, right. I'll bet you $20 I can get you gambling before the end of the day.
You owe me 15 grand, pal.
Pay him. Pay that man his money.
It's the Bet the Board podcast.
God likes me. He really, really likes me.
In the end, I wound up right back where I started. I could still pick winners, and I could still make money for all kinds of people back home. And why mess up a good thing?
Here's Payne Insider and Todd Fuhrman.
Welcome into the Bet the Board podcast, NFL Week 4, Monday Night Football edition, and we have a pair of Monday Night Football games to break down a little bit later in the program. I am your host, Todd Fuhrman, joined, as always, by my esteemed colleague and co-host, the one, the only Payne Insider. And Payne, another week of NFL football nearly in the books. We're almost at the quarter pole, and there are still a bevy of teams I feel I've learned absolutely nothing about.
Yeah, I mean, that just kind of is what it is this season, it seems. The AFC specifically. What was the anticipation coming into the season? That this was going to be the conference that was extremely difficult, right? All these great teams, and you're looking at that currently, and Kansas City is certainly the cream of the crop, but what's going on there with injuries? Right? I mean, you're not winning. I love Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid as much as anybody, but I don't think you're winning a Super Bowl without Rice and Pacheco and Hollywood Brown. I mean, they've basically been neutered on offense. You look around the rest of the landscape, Houston certainly has some issues. Baltimore, we'll probably talk about their performance last night, but it's not perfect. Buffalo, again, a team we'll probably talk about here in a couple seconds, finally stepped up in class. What does it look like? Well,
they may have stepped up in class. I'm not sure they got off the bus with a game plan that was capable of winning a game in hostile territory.
I mean, you throw 4-yard routes all day. I mean, when you play a team with a pulse, you know, right? And then you have an opponent that's actually willing to attack your weakness. This is what it looks like. And then even all the other teams in the AFC that had these deltas, that if they reached the peak of the delta, you're like, oh, this team's a contender. Jets came back to life. The Dolphins are abysmal, right? They're on the low end of the delta range of theirs. Cleveland, we didn't like coming into the season, but if everything worked well, right, they'd reach a certain spectrum of their delta. They have not, right? It's the low end of their delta. Cincinnati still looks a little clunky yesterday. They finally get off the schneid and get their first win of the season. What other team is there in the AFC? We thought this was going to be a heated battle, and it might be down the stretch record-wise, but there isn't an elite team that's rolling perfect right now, even the 4-0 Chiefs with those injuries.
Yeah, I was going to say the Chiefs suddenly becoming it. Well, not suddenly. I mean, they leaned into their defense last year, and when you look at the player personnel that they had on that roster coming into the year, you figured this was going to be a vintage Kansas City offense. The defense just had to be average, and they'd be able to win games by outscoring their opponents. Doesn't appear to be the case, at least right now, given the injuries you mentioned. And I think it gives us the perfect segue as we go into kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly, and may as well start with your good in terms of what performance, whether it be individual or team-wise, really stood out for you so far through Week 4.
There was a couple of them. I think the glaring one, and we'll just return to the scene of the crime. I mean, clearly the NFL has not been great to us through 4 weeks so far. There's no sugarcoating that. We probably deserve a little bit better, but people won't like hearing this. Negative variance could easily be, 2-2. You look on the newsletter, it's 4-0, 0-4 here. So, yeah. I mean, it is what it is. Have no problem returning to the scene of the crime and discussing yesterday. I thought Vic Fangio was going to give us back-to-back weeks of game planning specific to opponent. Great game plan against the Saints, horrific against Tampa, and that was the one fear, that Vic would go back to the traditional zone coverage defense without the realization that Baker Mayfield torches zone. His splits, his sensitivity. You got to play a little bit more man against Baker. And you look through 3 quarters, successful on 57% of his dropbacks, third best in EPA per dropback at plus 0.41. Went back this morning and watched again. I don't know what's going on in that locker room. The swings in performance and energy and effort, it's wild to see from quarter to quarter, half to half, game to game for Philadelphia right now. There was no energy or effort from that Eagles defense. They were not running to the ball and gang tackling. When they got to the ball, shoddy tackling. It was nothing but like outside receiver screen. It was just layups for Baker in that offense. It was an ugly scene. Now, you go back and you look. I mean, again, it's tough to win first half unders when you're getting short fields, special teams gaffes. If you just on the surface said, hey, you play a first half under, one of these teams has 0 yards gained through a quarter and a half. You feel like this is great.
I laugh to keep from crying because that's exactly what I thought watching that. And when you mentioned short fields, the Eagles defense finally rears its ugly head, gets a stop. It's 14-0. You feel okay. The game's going to settle in, and then the Eagles on special teams decide they're going to block a Bucs player in the back directly into Cooper DeJean, and then the rest was history.
Fumble, short field, then you say, hey, maybe we get a little lucky here once. The first 3 weeks was just nothing but negative variance. We haven't caught a break yet. Maybe we get a little stop on 4th and goal from the 1.5. Can't get it. So, bad bet. There were better out there to make. Baker Mayfield went out and torched his own defense that elected to play gobs of zone yesterday. So kudos to him. They got back on track. Obviously, the conversation from that game, at least in the forward-facing media, will be Tom Brady and his comments regarding Baker Mayfield.
What an incredible comment, by the way. Do you just want to fill the listeners in for those that either didn't watch the game or happen to see it go viral on social media?
Well, it happened a little bit in the offseason. Baker Mayfield had suggested the locker room was a little bit more upbeat heading into the season. Guys were having a good time, playing a little bit looser, feeling a little bit looser, as opposed to a season ago where work felt like a hurdle. And sometimes that can be the case when things aren't going extremely well, right? When Brady steps in and everything is a little bit more detail-oriented, a little bit more focused on work, and you're winning, it goes well. When you're 500, that can start to wear on you a little bit. And so Baker had basically made those comments in the offseason, as you would expect a TV broadcast would do, gave Tom that quote, and he kind of ran with it, saying, hey, you don't win Super Bowls having fun. I'm not running a daycare.
Pretty strong words for sure. And even looking at Brady's body language, I encourage our listeners to go check the actual video footage. You can see how angry Brady is. I mean, it's not in a joking manner. It's not with a wry smile or anything along those lines. You could see that it clearly got under his skin a little bit. And credit to Tom Brady to some extent for sharing his displeasure with those particular comments around a team and a franchise that he led to the Super Bowl. For me, Payne,
but he said it professionally.
Yeah, he did.
And
look,
before the
game,
game,
and I think they did it the right way. And Brady didn't make a joke of it. He said, "Look, to your point, I'm not running a daycare. If I want to have fun, I'll take my kids to Disneyland."
And before the game, out on the field, right, meeting up with Mike Evans, everyone seemed happy to see him. So, yes, Baker's comments probably true to a degree, but as soon as some of those past players that he was out in the field with saw him, their eyes lit up. It was cool. I mean, you brought him a Super Bowl. Something that probably isn't going to happen with Baker, even as good as this does look at times.
True. Very, very good point. I'm going to take the low-hanging fruit out there as well, and I'm going to highlight the Washington Commanders. It was a side that I liked in Arizona, realized that was a bad bet pretty early on in that contest. And when you look at the Commanders' offense, they are absolutely humming. The last time the Commanders scored at least 38 points in consecutive games came back in 1991. Through 4 games this season, 23 scoring drives, 19 incomplete passes, 4 punts. It was a complete team effort. Jayden Daniels does incredible things with his arm and his legs in terms of completing the short balls, looking for the vertical shots downfield. And you can see the defense playing inspired football, knowing that every mistake isn't going to cost them or they have to win games 17-14. While it may have been a negative for the Cardinals, I don't want to detract from what the Washington Commanders were able to do for the second time in 6 days. Not against an elite defense, but they took care of business, winning outright yet again on the road as an underdog.
I believe the line we used in the offseason.
Got that mute button fired up over there, huh?
That there were adults in the room. That's what we discussed about Washington in the offseason. And that is coming to fruition, right? Dan Quinn's defense is not great. It has holes, but they can get stops from time to time. You can tell there's energy and effort. Guys are flying to the ball, to your point. Jayden Daniels is exceeding expectation, right? He's setting rookie records for completion rate. He's been pinpoint accurate. He provides that different dimension with his legs. Kliff Kingsbury appears to have gone to offensive coordinator rehab. This isn't four verts air raid offense with little complexity. And I don't know if you caught that this week. Kliff spoke about it, said his time away from the NFL did him good, that he was studying a lot of offensive coordinators, guys that had success transitioning from college to the NFL, mentioned Todd Monken specifically. Now, I am interested to see what this looks like moving forward. Give Washington all the credit in the world. They're first place in the division, something nobody expected through 4 weeks. Their win total was 6.5. It was a win total that we kind of toyed with, but we just never got there. Week 1 against Todd Bowles' defense, it was not great. Kingsbury still wasn't using pre-snap motion. The rate of play action isn't as large as you'd think. So a lot of these changes he's discussing is more like route concept stuff. He's giving Jayden more answers to the test with some of these routes. Hey, if this is not here, we have this underneath valve for you. It's not four verts. So the route tree stuff has changed. It's the Giants secondary. It's the Bengals. It's the Cardinals. Clearly, Dan Quinn let Kliff get his revenge and run up the score late, so it looks a little bit better. He knew every Kyler strength and weakness, so I'm sure Kliff assisted Dan Quinn as well a lot this week. It's been an excellent 3-game stretch. But I think even if you're like the largest Commanders homer, you understand 1 punt in 3 games isn't something that's going to continue. But it was, again, another great offensive effort here, a great team win, going on the road as a 3.5-point closing dog, winning outright in astounding fashion, and Kliff got his revenge.
That he did. Coaches getting the best of their previous employers seems to be a common theme so far in the NFL during the month of September. Other good that you wanted to highlight before we kind of pivot into the bad that we've seen so far this week?
And this will probably help us pivot because I think there's two ends of the spectrum. The positive end is the Broncos defense. That is a unit that continues to play to a level not many saw coming. And you think about the opponent. Certainly there was some weather there, and that assisted some things. But you think about the Jets, right? Its offense was starting to get on track. We kind of threw out that opener, right? It was a tough week 1 matchup on the road at San Francisco against that 49ers defense, and Aaron Rodgers kind of getting his legs under him again. Okay, no biggie. It wasn't a great performance. Week 2, the Jets had a fantastic second half on the road in Tennessee. You could start to see some things coming together. You follow that up, dismantling Gerard Mayo's Patriots defense on Thursday night, a secondary that we thought was good coming into the season. You hire a defensive mind in Gerard Mayo. You think that's going to be the unit that leads the team, and Rodgers was fantastic, looked spry. Then all of a sudden, you get extra time to prepare for Denver heading into week 4. Broncos defense that just played in extreme heat and humidity in Florida week 3. And so for me, it was a hat tip to Denver's defense for completely shutting down Aaron Rodgers and the Jets. Vance Joseph has pushed the right buttons this offseason and through 4 weeks completely shut down the Jets ground game. There's been some buy-in. We heard about it in the offseason from players along that Broncos defensive front. There were guys looking for new contracts. Patrick Surtain in the back certainly become a shutdown corner. He's happy now with his new contract. The reason if you go back to our season preview, we were a little bit more bullish on the Broncos defense relative to market and what was being said by other people. Was reading all the reports in the split scrimmages the week of the Packers game. Now, I don't really give a shit what happened in the preseason game, and that came to fruition. The Denver defense carried over what they did, but those scrimmages leading up to that game, Denver, you would just hear, was kicking the crap out of the Packers offense, a good Packers offense, a Packers offense that we had high hopes for coming into the season. And now all of a sudden you're seeing it translate into the regular season, and through 4 games, Denver, 4th in EPA per play allowed, only 38% of plays have graded successful. That unit has carried the rookie quarterback to this point.
It's wild, too, when you look at this Broncos defense, and I think when we talk about positional premiums that you've mentioned until you're blue in the face, the luxury you're afforded as a defense when you have a top cover corner that can take away the number one weapon for an opposing offense, it makes defensive game planning that much more straightforward, and you're seeing that on full display for Patrick Surtain. And for the second time in as many weeks, he completely neutralized Mike Evans last week, and we just saw what Evans did against the Eagles, and more or less eliminated Garrett Wilson entirely from the Jets' game plan in terms of the passing attack, holding Wilson to 5 catches for 41 yards on 8 targets, forcing Rodgers to spread it around. And when you look at this Broncos team, there's no doubt they haven't exactly played an elite level of offense over the last couple weeks, but you see what they did to Tampa, shutting him down, leaning into the weather, and benefiting immensely. And you mentioned going kind of as the segue from good to bad. This Jets offense, Payne, they look to be humming on all cylinders. When we last saw them on Thursday night against the New England Patriots, it was a pass-happy attack. They played with a little pace. There was some cadence to it. Aaron Rodgers got the ball out quickly. Well, all the progress they had made in that game, it came crashing back to earth. And one of the biggest culprits, at least from what I've seen, is the production they're not getting out of a high-profile running back in Breece Hall, who finished the game with 10 carries for a grand total of 4 yards. The Jets don't run it when they have multiple cracks first and goal with Braylon Allen, who had shown the ability to break tackles and been more dynamic. And when you look at Breece Hall, the 4th worst when it came to rushing yards over expectation, giving up minus 1.62 yards per attempt, according to Next Gen Stats. This Jets offense has to figure out who their playmakers are and get those guys more touches and the ball in space if they're going to be successful.
You were obviously not high on Nathaniel Hackett. There is certainly a ceiling there. I don't know why Braylon Allen didn't get some touches there around the goal line. In saying that, the staff clearly realizes this backfield is changing a little bit because you can just see it in the usage numbers. It's trending far closer to a split with Braylon Allen and Breece Hall. If you looked at the first 2 weeks, Breece Hall's usage rate was, I think I want to say it was like 80%, and now we're trending towards like a 45-35 split with the rest of the carries going to a third member. Hall, I think, is still dynamic out of the backfield as a pass catcher.
100%.
And I felt,
split him out wide, get him the ball in space, and let him make defenders miss.
That's been the best part of his game since entering the NFL, in my mind. Now, the sample size is small with just 4 games, but Breece Hall right now 31st in yards per rush versus expectation among qualifying running backs. There's also clearly some issues. It feels like offense versus defense. We really didn't think much of that weird interaction with Salah and Rodgers on Thursday night. Certainly it got mentioned, but it was like Rodgers saying, hey, this game's still going on here. This thing isn't over yet. And Salah's like celebrating it. And then there was some jabs last night in both of their pressers where Salah said, hey, maybe we have to look into our cadences causing some of the pre-snap penalties. And it's Rodgers coming out and saying, hey, this was an outlier. Prior to this week, we had 1 pre-snap penalty. Cadence is something that this offense relies on. It's something we work on in practice every day. We need to hold people accountable. So there's been a little bit of jabbing back and forth in their pressers between Salah and Rodgers right after the game.
Always interesting to see that drama kind of unfold with the veteran that should have full command of the offense and a defensive-minded head coach whose defense goes out there and performs. The offense doesn't do their part, and how different the storyline can be if Greg Zuerlein makes the late field goal and the Jets escape with a 12-10 victory. In terms of other bad that caught your eye, where do you want to take us?
I think you have to go to Jacksonville again. And I probably was too willing to overlook some things this offseason about the Jaguars, and my guys were kind of hounding me to go under on this win total because they were not buyers of Trevor Lawrence, and the schedule was obviously quite difficult. Trevor Lawrence isn't good. And you looked last year, and certainly there were some injuries to tackles and wide receivers, and he was injured, and you could make some excuses, but this is brutal. I mean, 20 points on the scoreboard, yeah. 7 were gifted on special teams. There's a 2-yard drive. And I get it, right? So many things unfold throughout 60 minutes on both sides of the ball. But Lawrence isn't even making routine plays right now. And it seems to be something we see every single week. You think about this game, 3rd and 1 on the Texans 34, down 14-10 with under 4 minutes to go in the first half. Press Taylor has a play-action rollout. Lawrence is not pressured. Lawrence can't even complete a wide-open running back pass to Etienne. And so you're settling for this long field goal to make it 14-13. And you just see Lawrence constantly missing the game-changing plays. Christian Kirk wide open down the field, just can't hit the throw. Multiple deep throws where guys are just wide open, game-changing. Jacksonville should have won that game. And Trevor Lawrence yesterday finished QB 26 out of 28 in EPA plus completion percentage over expectation. Only Minshew and a gentleman we'll talk about a little bit later here were worse. And now you're 0-4. The conversation we had in the offseason was we understood that Jacksonville was a poor franchise. But Doug and Lawrence were getting them to a higher floor. Now you're at 0-4. The floor is not there anymore.
No, now it's damage control.
I don't know what the next move is. You just paid Trevor Lawrence, so I think it's clearly coach out before quarterback at this point. So it'll be interesting to see how this unfolds moving forward.
Yeah, not exactly ideal for what the Jaguars fans and front office believe was going to be their generational quarterback that could take them to heights never really before realized as far as consistency, and now Trevor Lawrence mired in the longest quarterback losing streak in the entire NFL. I'm going to go out west, Payne, and look at the Chargers-Chiefs game. The Chargers built a 10-0 lead and aren't able to do a damn thing offensively against Kansas City. Credit to Chiefs defensively for kind of clamping down. We know that this is a Chargers team that came in with a myriad of injuries along their offensive line. Justin Herbert, not 100%, but the Chiefs sold out, stopped the run. J.K. Dobbins, 14 carries, 32 yards, rushing over expectation, nothing to write home about. And Justin Herbert, at least on the stat sheet, 179 yards passing, was his single greatest offensive output of the season. But I mean, this offense right now is extremely limited with difference makers on the outside. We saw flashes of Ladd McConkey, and maybe it's not fair to grade them when your offensive line is supposed to be one of your strengths and it's not at 100%. But clearly this offense has a long way to go because it's a Chargers defense that, to some extent, even against an undermanned Chiefs team, actually played a little bit better than I anticipated coming into the game.
Yeah, I don't love putting teams in negative categories that play with their left hand tied behind their back against superior competition, and that's what we had here. You mentioned it. Both Chargers starting tackles were out, Alt and Slater. Justin Herbert clearly is not healthy with the high ankle sprain, and give him some credit for toughing it out. We anticipated with the bye week that he may sit this game, chose not to. And he's throwing to a below-average pass-catching group. And you're going against a Spags defense that loves to send some heat and light you up, and you mentioned that 10-0 start. Things look good. Final 3 quarters, though, the Chargers offense had a 21% success rate, worst in the league, minus 0.37 EPA per play over that same stretch. Only the Patriots were worse. So this was a very bad performance from the Chargers offense, and I am interested to see what this looks like out of the bye with Herbert healthy. We did see some flashes from Ladd McConkey. Johnston, to this point, I would say has exceeded every expectation we've had. And so if you're getting good from McConkey and Johnston is exceeding expectation and your offense still has some question marks, like where is the ceiling this season? J.K. Dobbins, you're kind of biding your time there. I mean, you don't want to You're not wishing injury. He's obviously had a very good start to the season. But how long is that going to last with as many touches as he seemingly is going to get in this style of offense? But to your point, Todd, I think the overarching thing is the best part of this offense is very much the offensive line. And when you're down 2 first-round picks, it becomes quite difficult. And it's not just that. You're sliding Pipkins back to right tackle. That was an area where he wasn't very good at. You were upgrading the guard position because he just felt more suited to play that position, and now you have to insert someone else into guard. So it's basically, a shuffling of chairs, not to just 2 places, but 3 in this current construct.
When we go to the ugly and we talk about offenses and quarterback play and that sort of thing, I feel like I know where you're going to go, given what you highlighted at the top of the show, being the Buffalo Bills deciding not to play to their strengths and allow a franchise quarterback to do his thing with a dink and dunk offense against a team built to stop the run and rally to short passes.
I got to tell you, I thought we were going to get screwed there. Shakir had his 2 catches very early, sprains the ankle, and I'm like, here we go.
Yep. Playing the game again.
It's non-frickin' stop with negative variance. Fortunately, he was able to retape it, come back out there. And then you're thinking, he's stuck on 3 for a while, but the game state is perfect. You're like, hey, Buffalo's chasing here. I mean, this is going to be inconceivable. It can't lose. And fortunately, you get over the hump there. But this was my concern, right? When Buffalo was going to step up a little bit, what was going to transpire. And we talked about it when we previewed the game. Arizona defensively, we know what that looks like, right? We've seen it multiple weeks now. We saw it yesterday. The Dolphins defense with some injuries. Jacksonville's defense, we saw it again. Like, they just hadn't played anybody. And so this style of offense that's just dink and dunk and get everybody involved and not focus on the key players, it's very weird. And I was talking to someone who made a much better analogy than I did. I think we were like, everybody's involved here. The beer vendors getting catches, the peanut boys getting carries. He was basically saying to me, it's like, think about going to a concert, whatever your favorite band is, and they're not playing the hits. You're getting the worst 3 or 4 songs
and I
from
leave there
each
pissed
album.
off every time.
Yeah, and so that's basically what the offense has felt like for 3 games, even though you're 3-0 and everything feels... Now you step up in class a little bit. You step up in competition. This very much looked like the last time we saw this offense going against the Chiefs, where it's Josh Allen having to play superhero, and you're just dumping it off to ancillary running backs and weapons behind the line of scrimmage or for 3 or 4 yards. There's nothing downfield. Keon finally got involved a little bit downfield, much to our chagrin, late in that game. But I don't know what this offense... And then Joe Brady. I mean, it feels like the momentum's about to turn, right? We've seen Baltimore the last couple of weeks with these leads. They start to just kind of disappear. And so at 21-10, I believe it's 2nd and 7, you're just outside the green zone. Feels like momentum's about to change. And what Joe Brady calls something ridiculous. I don't know what that trick play was, but it almost ended your season because Josh Allen got decapitated. But that's the time, right? Down 11, you're in the 3rd quarter, you're just outside the green zone, it's 2nd and 7. It's 4-down territory. That's when all those 3-yard passes you love to ancillary players, that's when you start fucking rolling those things out again. Keep that going. Right? Because you just need to pick up 7 yards and move the chains. There isn't a need for some trick play. It's one game. We're not going to overreact, but we were kind of saying, hey, let's kind of dial back the expectation after the 3-0 start based upon who they'd played and based upon how teams were electing to attack.
One hell of a game we'll get, and we'll break it down in greater detail on Thursday when the Bills go on the road to the Houston Texans. I think it'll give us a data point around both of those teams. That we'll get a better indication of who they're going to be in the pecking order for the AFC. Staying in that same game, Payne, from the ugly standpoint, I know he has been the bane of many fantasy managers' existence so far this season. Mark Andrews, does he have a role in this Ravens offense going forward other than a blocker? 1 target, granted he should still be running after the ball that hit him right in the hands, but he looks old and slow. I don't know if the Ravens make a concerted effort to build his confidence up or get him back in there, or does he just continue to get phased out of what they're doing in their game plans?
Yeah, I don't know if it's phasing him out. Clearly there was a game plan there where he was helping as a blocker. I don't know. Let's just put it that way. I have no idea, right? I mean, as you mentioned it, he gets involved in the game. He's, it's a pass that looks like it's about 16 air yards. He's got an ability to turn and get up the field and go, and he drops it. They didn't really throw the ball a ton last night.
No, second game in a row they haven't had to.
So you get the drop, and then it becomes a game state where you're up 3 scores.
Yep.
Last week it looked like he rebounded a little bit. Game 1 obviously saw the most doubles and brackets he had seen in 3 years. The Chiefs had made a concerted effort to remove him from the game. And so clearly he's not prime Mark Andrews, but he still looks like he has some juice, and there needs to be an effort to get him the ball, gain that confidence back, because you're going to need him. Because at this point it's basically Zay Flowers and a ground game.
Yep, you'll have to show some of those weapons if you have to come back in any of these games. And, maybe we see a little bit more from their passing attack this week, although no reason to throw the football against what we've seen on the ground against Cincinnati Bengals. We talked a little bit about this game earlier, but I wanted to highlight it. Granted, it was a win for a young quarterback on the road against the good defense, but Bo Nix's stat line, at least for me, was one of the more entertaining things I saw all weekend. Kudos to him, again, for getting the W, but finished just 12 of 25. At halftime, he hadn't completed a ball past the line of scrimmage. At one point in the game, his stat line read 6 for 11 with -7 yards, and Cortland Sutton was the only Denver Broncos receiver who finished the game with more than 3 yards. Yes, weather played a role there. Denver's defense masked their deficiencies, but we can't sugarcoat what we've seen from the Broncos offense.
No, it's... You mentioned it. Weather wasn't great. Game turned into a bit of a grinder. It was 2+ defenses out there on the field, but all of the things that we have discussed about Bo Nix, both at the college level and some of our breakdowns and season previews at Oregon, and then transitioning into this season with Denver and some of the game breakdowns we've had thus far, he struggles when he's asked to push the ball downfield. And I think I've used this analogy before with other young quarterbacks, but it's basically a race between Nix's growth and defense's catching on. Nix right now 3 for 15 with 2 interceptions on throws over the middle of the field, 10+ yards. He is not throwing to certain parts of the field. When he does, there's zero efficiency. This is a copycat league. Everyone watches film. None of these guys are going to class. Like, this is all they do. And so... can he start being efficient to all areas of the field? If not, defenses are going to game plan and take out what he's been doing. Specific to yesterday's game against the Jets, Bo's first half is record books bad. 0 for 8 on throws past the line of scrimmage. The 7 completions were all behind the line of scrimmage and went for -7 yards. 0% success rate in the first half on his 16 dropbacks. For the entire game, Bo Nix's completion rate was 20% below expectation, worst mark of the entire season for any quarterback that is played. Very fortunate effort, and that's why it wasn't on my mind initially, but this morning as I dug through some more things, had to include Denver's defense in the good section.
Oh, it makes a ton of sense. Wasn't sure if there was anything else on the ugly side, or we just pivot real quick and hit on some of the look-ahead lines and the adjustments we've seen in the market.
Yeah, let's go for it.
All right. You can follow Payne on social media at Payne Insider. I'm Todd Fuhrman. You can follow me there as well. Most importantly, for all things Bet the Board, be sure to follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod. And as Payne mentioned, look, the best bets on the NFL, not up to our high standards around here, but the newsletter has been. 4-0 with player props there. It arrives directly to your inbox each and every Friday. Check your spam filters. Make sure you're subscribed. No excuse not to be adding that particular best bet and investment to your portfolio each and every week. Payne, when we look at the look-ahead numbers, we can rapid-fire these through. The Falcons were a 3-point favorite on the look-ahead number against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That number comes off the key. Falcons escape with a narrow victory with a late field goal from Young Koo, and we talked about the Bucs earlier, obliterating the Eagles for the second time in about 9 months after they did so in the playoffs.
2 different results. One team dominates. The other team... I want to look into this game a little bit more, but felt like they luck boxed their way to a win. Atlanta had the... I don't know what Rashid Shaheed was doing. He decided to turn back the clock and try to catch a punt over his shoulder like he was Willie Mays at the 3-yard line.
Some of these guys, the age-old adage, and I was never a punt returner, as I don't think will come as a shock to anybody listening to this podcast.
You weren't.
What happened?
In your past life, you weren't a punt returner.
No, I was not a
punt returner. Color me
shocked.
I
was no Tim Dwight. Put your heels on the 10-yard line like they used to say all the time. The ball goes over your head, let it go. Don't try and make the catch inside the 3.
It was unbelievable. So Atlanta scored a touchdown there. Later saw a pick 6 transpire. I need to go back and watch, but Atlanta's offense looked a little clunky again. I don't know what's going on with Bijan Robinson. That situation isn't as bleak as Breece Hall, but it's starting to get there. Tyler Algier was far more efficient again as a runner. But that's what you're getting. Tampa's defense potentially can get a little bit healthier. We'll have to monitor. Antoine Winfield Jr. was back out there this week. Wasn't really a threat to play, and obviously this is a short week on Thursday, but it feels like Tampa's getting slightly healthier. So that's the reason for the adjustment off the 3. Does Atlanta? I don't think Atlanta scored an offensive touchdown in that game. Is that correct?
Yeah, they did not.
Yeah. So the market is far more efficient than years past. Typically, that line would just stick the same. Everyone sees, hey, the Falcons won the game, but a little bit of a phony final.
A favorite flip for our first London game of the season. The Jets were a 1.5-point favorite against the Minnesota Vikings. We didn't mention the Vikings in the good because it feels like a broken record with this team continuing to win games outright as an underdog. But lo and behold, we see the Vikings a 2.5-point favorite against the Jets in London and a juiced 2.5 at that.
Not shocking. Now, where does the resistance point come?
The 3s were cleared out on Sunday night. I will say that.
They were. So this is potentially the point here where we don't see a ton of movement. I'm interested to see if that was an attempt to get back into range here.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. The other thing, too, that we didn't talk about with the Jets, by the way, Aaron Rodgers didn't exactly look like he was 100% at the end of that game, limping over the sideline.
That's why we initially saw this move, right? Clearly, the Jets lose outright as an 8-point favorite on the closing line. Minnesota goes into Green Bay and builds a 28-0 lead and just looks dominant as ever. And so you were going to get movement based upon that. But yes, Aaron Rodgers was out there limping around towards the end of that game, and so the initial thought process is, hey, let's just get out ahead, number grab Minnesota here because we know which way this is going, and then we'll figure out the rest later. Nope. And so
makes it
that's kind of why we've seen the
world of sense. A divisional battle. We talked a lot about the Ravens. Didn't mention the Bengals at all. They get a workman-like performance against the Carolina Panthers. Still plenty of things they have to address defensively, but the whole world saw the Ravens boat race the Buffalo Bills. Ravens were a 1-point favorite on the road against a divisional foe. This number out to a soft 3 at some of your most prominent offshore shops for their trip to Cincinnati.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't look great for Cincinnati either. I mean, they get the win. Offense looks okay. Defense continues to be an issue, and we saw Trey Hendrickson leave the game. So
had that stinger late.
Have to monitor that situation. I don't know. They were trying to figure out what it was. He was down on the ground, and they were arm, shoulder, neck. Let's monitor that. Obviously, Cincinnati does not have many premium players on the defensive side of the ball. He would be the one guy, and he's been the one keeping things afloat. Certainly not a great spot. Meaningful game for both. Intrigued to see how high this potentially gets, but I would anticipate lots of one-way money for Baltimore until there's got to be a stopping point. You
would think it gets there eventually. One thing to monitor too for the Bengals, we saw Chase Brown in their backfield by committee approach achieve his highest snap share of the season. Also got a goal line touch, which I don't think any fantasy manager owner anticipated. Yep, a 60-40 split there. His 27 snaps far in excess of what we saw week 1 for Chase Brown when he only had 17. So maybe a changing of the guard there, especially against a Ravens defense known to stop the run, that you may want the more valuable pass catcher out there in multiple situations. And the
if
last,
you look at rush expectancy, he's been the far more efficient back.
Well, we knew he was the explosive back. It was the efficiency that they were concerned about, and clearly, if he's going to achieve that role ahead of Zach Moss, you'll see them switch, much like we're starting to see in Tampa between Bucky Irving and Rachaad White. One other game moving through the key, and it's a team we talked about. The Washington Commanders were a 1-point favorite for a home date against the Cleveland Browns. The Browns came out here, missed an extra point, had a questionable series with a chance to win the game in the red zone against the Las Vegas Raiders. So what do books do? They move the Washington Commanders from a 1-point favorite all the way through the key of 3, now out to 3.5.
I'm just interested to see what version of Cleveland's defense we get here because, home road splits have been drastic the last season plus. And it'd be interesting just to see, on paper, this would be Jayden Daniels' toughest test. This would be Washington's toughest test. The care factor is it's getting interesting for Cleveland to blow a 10-0 lead to the Raiders, who we have some questions about in terms of care factor. Oof, says a lot. So that's why we've seen this move. Clearly, Cleveland took some money based upon the guys that were missing last week. Although there was some buybacks on the Raiders once it got to +3, but effectively, right, we saw a move through 0 where Cleveland went from +1.5 to out to as high as -3. If you got that 5-point move, you're up 10-0. You still can't win the game. And then Washington just looks completely different the last 3 weeks. So one team's certainly flying a little bit high, confident, feels like they want to be on the football field. The other team, potentially not so much. But we are certainly arriving at new prices for Washington. And yes, they're winning these games, but you're going from underdog to favorite and needing to cover the all-important key. So
you're going to need to monitor the injury situation as well for the Cleveland Browns. They lose yet another cog along their offensive line, a backup center that ultimately became their undoing because there was no communication with Deshaun Watson. So a 1st and 10 at the Raiders 17 turns into a 2nd and 16, and it snowballs from there. But for those folks scoring at home in just a matter of weeks, we've gone from the Commanders, a 2.5-point favorite being bet down against the Giants in a game they win with field goals. The Giants, a 6.5-point dog at the Cleveland Browns, and now the Commanders, a 3.5-point favorite against the Browns. Clearly, if you're trying to connect the dots from a linear progression, some things aren't adding up, but market perception, current form do play a massive role in a lot of these things. Now, speaking of current form and market perception, Payne, it allows us to get into the pair of Monday night games tonight, and we can start with the contest in your backyard, where we see the Dolphins, a 2.5-point favorite, now painted across the board. Total of 37 on this one as they welcome in the winless Tennessee Titans. And the Dolphins have the dubious distinction through 3 games, not having led a single solitary second in any of their football games so far this season. When you look at how things have gone, it's the first time enter a game with a record under 500 in the Coach McDaniel era. The Titans, meanwhile, have started 0-3 for the first time since 2009, a year where they started the season 0-6. Would be the third 0-4 start since moving to Tennessee, something that they haven't done since 2009. When we look at the Titans, 1-11, their last 12 road games, their lone victory coming as a 2-touchdown underdog against the Miami Dolphins. And as far as, some of the other total trends that are there, you've seen a rash of unders for relatively low totals. Yet another one added to the success column between the Raiders and Browns that closed 37 or lower. But if you're looking at this game, we know the biggest storyline is Snoop Huntley making his Dolphins debut. Can he get the ball out of his hand and allow the Dolphins playmakers to do what they do best? All signs point to Raheem Mostert being inactive for this game yet again. But the Titans' strength has been their defense, while their offense leaves a lot to be desired. One matchup that stands out to you that you're curious to see unfold in a game probably best defined as being the ultimate high-variance battle.
Did you say this is the first game that Mike McDaniel's coached for the Dolphins where they're below 500?
That was the nugget that I had read coming into in terms of preview. Yep.
Got to fire him. Get him out of here.
I didn't say I was going to go that far, but I have been underwhelmed with some of these offensive efforts over the last couple of weeks.
I've seen the tweets, one of which was from our good buddy BP. This is certainly a big game for Mike McDaniel, and yes, to a degree, the luster's starting to wear off, and the doubters have been loud. I still believe in his scheme and ability as a play caller. There's obvious issues here with personnel. I mean, Chris Greer has done a good job acquiring the high-end talent, and he's found some nice players in the draft. But the roster has serious holes, and I think we talk about this all the time. It's like Chris Greer will make a head-scratching move, and then all of a sudden, like, one of the better moves, and you're like, who is this guy? Chris Greer's built a horrific offensive line and then decided to overpay a frail quarterback to play behind that horrible O-line. And I've been pretty boisterous in my opinion that I would not have inked Tua to that large of a deal, that I probably would have improved other areas, and if you were truly trying to go for it, knocked on Tom Brady's door to find one more season in him and go about it that way and then build through the draft. This was something that I did not agree with in terms of constructing this offense. And so here we are, and we shouldn't be shocked when it's Skylar Thompson, Tim Boyle behind a horrific offensive line that was also down its 2 starting tackles in Seattle, and then we're wondering how this happened. You think about this, right? And it's just like the Miami analogy. Basically, what Greer did was, built this Miami Beach condo in the middle of hurricane season without the necessary foundation, and that is the perfect depiction. Now tonight, I think Mike McDaniel has to come up with something for Snoop Huntley, right? We've seen the colleagues of Mike McDaniel scheme lesser quarterbacks into efficient games, right? His buddy Matt LaFleur did it with Malik Willis back-to-back games. This has, to me, at least be a condensed Miami offense. You can't expect Tyler Huntley in 14 days' time to fully know this, elaborate scheme and play with elite timing in the pass game. And the Dolphins' throw game is all about timing, right? We saw it in the Bills game, where you bring out Dubose, who has not been in this system, has barely run any routes. He's running a route, he doesn't know when to turn, and it causes an interception. Like, the idea that you're going to attempt to run your sophisticated offense that is just predicated on timing with Tyler Huntley, who's been here for that can't happen.
By the way, might have been the best throw Tua made all night, because that ball was on a rope, on a dime, and right where it needed to be.
It literally was right on his chest. He had no idea it was coming. So this, to me, has to be a condensed game plan. Get back to the run game coordinator you were in San Francisco. Play a little bit more low variance. Get A-Chain and Huntley in this zone read game. I think that needs to be incorporated tonight. You're thinking about the Titans' defense, right? Their big fella in the middle, Jeffrey Simmons, is out. Titans are 23rd in run-stop win rate through 3 games. Tennessee's allowing the highest rate of 3+ yard runs before first contact. The Dolphins' run game has been feast or famine, right? I think 32% of their runs have been 0 or negative. But in the rare instances where it's blocked well, the scheme really works. The Dolphins are elite in the percentage of runs that gain 3+ yards before first contact. We know A-Chain's a home run threat. So if the Titans aren't gap sound and the Dolphins block it up well a couple times this game, you could see some explosives there. Miami's throw game, I think you're hoping, to your point, Todd, to be a little bit functional. I don't think it's elite. So it's really, for me, about Mike McDaniel returning to his roots, firing up the ground game, getting Snoop Huntley on the move here. Mostert, I would say, is trending towards out as well, but it's getting closer. So I'm interested to see what happens, though, in terms of a market perspective, because there was a group that bet Miami here, right? That's why they went from +1 out to like 2.75 as we record this. However, there are guys who think Tennessee is substantially better than their record. And so if you get to 3 here with a total of 37, I think that becomes attractive to others. So to me, if you've missed Miami, I would not be running at 2.75. Now, can Miami go out there and win and cover and make me sound like an idiot? Yes, but in terms of like market entry here, very horrific market entry, I would say, at 2.75.
By the way, if we were wondering about that resistance point, at least on a Monday morning, for the aforementioned Cleveland Browns trip to the Washington Commanders, came in 3.5.
I texted you.
Oh, Three and a half's turning into threes. All right, enough on the JV game between the Dolphins and Titans is currently constructed in the early game. When we look at the varsity game taking place in the normal Monday Night Football time slot, fascinating matchup between two teams in the NFC, one that I think has aspirations of winning the conference and another that would love to play spoiler, win their division, and go on a deep run in the Seattle Seahawks. You've seen a battle in this game in terms of side as well. Detroit, a 4-point favorite right now, pretty much painted across the board. There are some 4.5s if you happen to like the dog. Total starting to leak up. It was 46.5 painted earlier this week. We're now at 47 and even a prominent shop moving through the 47 out to 47.5. And you can understand why when you look at the injury report that doesn't appear all that promising for the Seahawks, at least on the defensive side of the ball. Now, recent meetings between these teams, they've combined for an average of 80-plus points per game, 913 total yards, and 52 first downs. 241 combined points is the fourth most in a three-game span between opponents all time. When you look at the Seahawks, this will begin a stretch of playing 3 games in 10 days. The Lions, we know from an ATS standpoint, they've been one of the best bets in the league, just backing them blindly, going 37-17 against the number over the past 4 seasons. Jared Goff has done surprisingly well when playing under the bright lights, and you'd have to imagine that there is a little bit of a path to success in this game. When we try and identify some of the matchups to watch, I alluded to Payne, some of the injuries for the Seahawks defensively, and they're pretty prominent. Leonard Williams out along the defensive line. Byron Murphy out with a hamstring injury. Linebackers, Boye Mafa out. Nwosu won't make the return. Mafa has led this team in pressure so far this season, and in steps a Detroit Lions team that wants to run the football, but that offensive line is currently constructed, not going to be at its best either. I mean, so far this year, the Lions have played 212 offensive snaps. They've had the same combination of starters in the trenches in 211 of those, but they're going to be without their center in Frank Ragnow for an extended period of time.
I think that's the game. That's the matchup. That's the key factor. And it's that straightforward. I mean, we have seen a battle in the market, at least earlier in the week, right? Lions minus 3.5 came in. As soon as we got to 4.5, there was a little bit of a difference of opinion, but the injury picture has become much clearer now. And we've seen Lions money trickle in a little bit. And we're effectively at like 4.25 as we record this. The entire defensive line is out. I mean, Leonard Williams and Byron Murphy are a very nice 1-2 combination in the middle, especially when you're attempting to stop the run. Starting edge rushers, you mentioned Nwosu and Mafo out, and we know Jared Goff is sensitive to pressure, has some of the biggest splits. And yes, the Lions' offensive line and offense in general has been a little bit more clunkier this season. You mentioned Ragnow being out, so it's not just defensive injuries, but Ragnow's an elite center. But I just would anticipate this being a Montgomery and Gibbs game. Ben Johnson getting back to the ground game like he did a week ago when he identified that matchup against Arizona. It's the clear path, I think, when you think about Seattle's defense in general, but also just, with those injuries. Even when healthy, Seattle was 18th in run-stop win rate. That's against really poor competition. Patriots offensive line, right? Worst in the league. Injured. We just talked about the Dolphins offensive line. Not very good. Injured. Bo Nix in his career opener at Lumen Field. And so, we love Mike McDonald. We thought the Seahawks defense would absolutely improve. Again, if you have the newsletter, you probably have something on Seattle for the season. But to what level has the defense improved? And I think we're trying to figure that out. This is a massive step up in class for the Seahawks defense tonight, and they're going to be doing it extremely shorthanded. This isn't Jacoby Brissett. This isn't Skylar Thompson and Tim Boyle, right? There is no reason the Lions aren't running the ball efficiently tonight. And I know the corner tandem of Witherspoon and Woolen is elite, but Goff should have time to throw as well. And I think that probably benefits the Lions offense. I'll be honest, our model spit out a substantially lower number on this total, but the injuries defensively have kept us off. And it's for both sides, right? The Lions are down Davenport and Barnes, and they've been without Kaminsky at defensive end and off the edge. Brian Branch in the slot has been downgraded to out, had the concussion, and then an illness popped up later in the week. And Geno has torched Aaron Glenn's defenses the last 2 seasons. And so that's kind of what's kept us off this game. even though the model just kind of spit out an under on this one. You would think another matchup worth looking at is Smith and Jigba, right? 95% route participation, more than any of the other Seattle receivers. 85% of the time he lines up in the slot. Detroit has allowed the most slot receptions in the league. But the game states have been funky, right? Not really a need to press the issue against the Broncos offense week 1. Week 2, when Seattle was forced to play catch-up, he was awesome. Week 3, the game state's a blowout. Here, you'd expect Seattle to be chasing some, but the Lions, if they're effective running the ball on the ground, they're going to be playing keep away, so how many possessions are there? Still, a very good matchup for Smith and Jigba there in the slot.
When you look at Jared Goff's performance so far this season, I mean, I know it's a limited sample size.
Down, way down.
No, that's what I would say. Passer rating sub 80. If the season ended today, it'd be the second worst of his entire career. Yeah, he's not going to face pressure, so I guess this could provide the get-right spot that Lions
Well, you never know.
So desperate.
You never know.
That's what I was going to say. So.
He likes to run himself into it this season, it seems. And there's also been like some...
Do we blame Ben Johnson for any of it?
I told you, there was some conversation about him getting too cool for school and doing some things, and then obviously there was trying to incorporate J-Mo a little bit more based upon what he was doing this offseason. And credits like J-Mo, right? The route tree expanded. He was healthy. Like, his game was coming along. But there was a lot less Laporta, a lot more trying to ram and jam J-Mo into the offense. And so it feels like Ben struggled a little bit trying to figure out how to get all these pieces the ball. And, you have Amaran, you have Laporta. J-Mo's moved into that spot. Gibbs is certainly explosive. Montgomery is just the guy who continues to grind out the tough yards, find the end zone. So there's just like so many weapons here, and you have this elite offensive line. So I think we're kind of in this weird environment where he's searching how to keep everybody happy, and you got to kind of get back to what you were doing a season ago.
I mean, there is only one football to go around and plenty of mouths to feed, so it'll be interesting to see what the Lions can do in this spot. When you look at the other side of the ball, Geno Smith has actually been surprisingly good when pressured so far this season. Payne talked a little bit about the matchup with JSN, but there is another matchup worth following that involves the Seattle ground game matched up against the Lions defensive front. And to break that down further with an actionable element, we bring in our propologist, Billy, to provide fresh perspective on the return of Kenneth Walker.
Good morning, Bet the Board listeners. This is Billy here with our Week 4 Monday Night Football prop. Just going to focus in on the Seattle versus Detroit game for now, trying to stay away from a Snoop Huntley, Will Levis high variance game for a pod play. If I have anything again, I'll put it out on Twitter, but no promises there. So let's dig into Seattle-Detroit. The prop we're going to go with is Kenneth Walker, under 55.5 rushing yards tonight. Widely available. I play this to 53.5. No worse juice at 55.5 than minus 125. Let's start with Detroit's defense here. They have played the Rams, who have Kyren Williams, Tampa Bay, who's got Bucky Irving and Rashad White, and Arizona, who has James Conner. They have yet to allow an individual rusher to gain over the 50-yard mark. Detroit grades out number 1 in defensive adjusted line yards and number 3 in defensive rush EPA. They're going to have both of their defensive tackles, Aleem McNeil and Onwuzurike, in. They were both kind of questionable coming into the week. They're both going to play. They have DJ Reader back now. He's kind of getting more acclimated with the team since missing the first couple games. He's the guy we talk about frequently when referring to Cincinnati's run defense and why they've struggled since his departure. He is just such a good run defender, and it shows in Detroit's metrics since he's been there. Meanwhile, on the other side of the ball, Seattle, they have not ran the ball well. They are 31st in run block win rate, 28th in rush success rate, 24th in rush EPA, and 20th in adjusted line yards. And, I throw all these metrics at you to illustrate that they're all in alignment here, and this isn't just one fluky grading metric or an instance where analytics may be leading you down the wrong path. Seattle's just flat out not getting that push, and they're struggling to find their run game. The O-line has been the weak point of the team since week 1. Some of that's been due to injury. Some of that's due to poor play. Kenneth Walker's obviously back after missing the past 2 games with an oblique injury, and he doesn't have an injury designation tonight. But Seattle does have a capable backup in Zach Charbonnet, who ran for 91 yards last week against Miami. So I'm interested to see the work rate for Kenneth Walker. He's coming off a bleak injury. This is a tough spot against a tough run defense. I'm interested to see his usage. I'm going to be a little more pessimistic on his usage for tonight. Last thing, we're going to do a couple game theory points here. First, the way Seattle should attack Detroit is through the air. They have a talented slew of receiving options, and Detroit has struggled in coverage with Terrion Arnold and Carlton Davis at the outside cornerback positions. And now we find out yesterday that they've ruled Brian Branch doubtful with an illness. And he's coming off a concussion in week 3, and then he's being ruled doubtful more than 24 hours before the game with an illness. Something's not really adding up there. I would expect him not to play if he's got a doubtful tag. Second point, Seattle defensive front is absolutely decimated themselves with injuries, so we could see a Detroit offensive game plan that utilizes more of a bully ball approach, take time off the clock, and limit Seattle's offensive possessions. Therefore, less possessions, less chance for Kenneth Walker to run up a number here. So there it is. We're going to go Kenneth Walker under 55.5 rush yards, good to 53.5. Best of luck tonight, guys.
Seahawks fans, Payne, have to love the return of their thunder and lightning combination. Zach Charbonnet wasn't the most efficient runner when he was RB1, but did provide a little bit of that downhill ability against the Dolphins. And I think these two complement them one another extremely well, knowing Kenneth Walker a little bit more of a home run threat, and Zach Charbonnet used for softening the defense with his battering ram style.
Yeah. You're also looking at a Lions defense that is elite stopping the run, has been for multiple seasons now. Mentioned the addition of DJ Reader in the offseason, a guy that, is one of the best run stuffers. So you're adding that to an already elite run defense. You're thinking about the game state potentially. And so makes a world of sense. I don't think Zach Charbonnet is going to be completely phased out. Always the ability with an under to have the re-aggravation of injury as well. We don't root for that, but certainly within the compass of possibilities. Let me say one thing.
Sure.
I'm not trying to be angry old man here. Get off my lawn, guy.
No, we need some. We need some of that. We haven't had a good Payne rant. We're almost at the quarter pole so far.
We've added Billy into the fold here because we're obviously not betting every single Monday night game. There isn't going to be a best bet. So we're trying to provide an actionable element for you fine folks, something we probably should have done a little bit prior to our 11th year. Let's put it that way. So it's on us. Error in judgment there. We should have had this. However, we're giving you a hand. Let's not take the arm. Let's not go into the comment section. Let's not bombard Billy looking for more freeloading. Okay, he's giving you an element here with the podcast. I read some of these mentions. Everyone's just pummeling him for more props, and those are the people who don't seem to be retweeting the podcast. I understand. Hey, you might only have 78 followers, 113 followers. You don't think it's meaningful, but it's all part of the algorithm. You could have 0 followers. So if you're going to beg and for more free, at least hit the retweet button. So that's my Monday rant. I don't like that type of behavior here. So we bring in an actionable element here. Billy's been very good with that, winning on these so far as one for us many years in the written form. Let's not go into the comment section and beg for more free.
It is the unfortunate nature of the world we live in. Billy providing great perspective, and to your point, look, eventually a tiger can change its stripes. Took us 11 years to add some of that prop component. I'm glad the listeners like it, but don't look a gift horse in the mouth. Take advantage of the information that's shared there instead of looking for 13 different ways to get involved with each standalone football game.
Especially if you're going to, take 3 minutes to construct a tweet and you can't hit retweet.
Exactly.
That stuff bugs me.
You're exactly right. I mean, word of mouth becomes the most valuable vehicle to get bet the board in front of more eyeballs. As folks know, from a sportsbook perspective, the content space has trended in a direction very different than what we try and provide. And while the best bets haven't been what we're looking for, there's still a ton of actionable information. The newsletter is there, and we're trying to make all of you better, smarter, more informed handicappers to improve your process like we've done since our inception back in 2014. Anything else that you would like to share, kind sir, before we reconvene with what could arguably be the worst viewing slate of college football I can remember in recent memory on Wednesday with Brad Powers.
No, back Wednesday and Thursday.
The beat moves on, ladies and gents. So for Payne Insider and Billy with that great prop information, I'm Todd Fuhrman. Again, rate, review, subscribe to the Bet the Board podcast. Share the podcast on your various social media channels. Word of mouth, the best vehicle we have to try and get this in front of more and more people. We love all of you, our loyal listeners, for contributing, the comments, the interactions, and everything else that comes from you. And most importantly, with a Kenneth Walker rushing total under the posted number in Monday Night Football, we'll see you at the window.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of Bet the Board. Make sure you follow Todd and Payne on X. Todd is at Todd Fuhrman. That's TODDFUHRMAN. And Payne is at Payne Insider. That's PAYNEINSIDER. Don't forget, our weekly newsletter comes with an additional best bet. Have that delivered to your inbox by clicking the link atop the podcast show notes. And most importantly, subscribe and download Bet the Board. We're on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Wondery, YouTube, Google Podcasts, and all your other major platforms.